Hello, everybody, and welcome to the third in a series of 4 MEA-focused webinars that we're hosting this week here at IHM. Today, we're looking at alternative real estate, and we're going to focus mainly on the living sector and the flexible workspace sectors. My name's George Sell. I'm editor of Urban Living News, and we are an online B2B news resource for the real estate and hospitality sectors. The webinar's going to last about an hour. We've got a great panel. We've got a lot to get through, but we'd like to make it as interactive as we can. So if you've got any questions, please do submit them using the chat or the Q&A function in Zoom. If you've registered for this session, you'll be getting an email in the next couple of days with a link to a recording of the webinar. Now, this series of webinars is sponsored by Rove Hotels, and we are going to watch a short video to find out some more about them. Okay, thanks very much to Rove for sponsoring. If you look in the chat, you can see some contact information there if you'd like to get in touch with them and find out more. So just want to show a couple of slides. These are all screen grabs of news stories we've run on our Urban Living News website, just to give you an idea before we start the conversation about some of the asset classes and some of the properties that we're going to be talking about today. So we're going to be covering co-living, flexible office space, later living, student accommodation, and maybe one or two other types of accommodation which are actually specific to this region. Some of the demographic fundamentals in the Gulf region are similar to other markets which we operate in, particularly on the senior living side. An aging population with a growing target audience for senior living. And the way we work is changing as well. So co-working is also becoming a large and growing asset class in the region. So we've got a fantastic panel to discuss the subject today. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves, and we'll do it as we'll go from left to right as we see them on the screen. So first of all, Navin, welcome to you, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. I'll just give you a brief.
Yeah, tell us a bit about yourself and SHG, please.
I'll give you a brief about our company, Strategic Housing Group. Strategic Housing Group is a JV of Asset Living, which is one of the largest student housing developer and operator based out of US. And we are rolling out the plan in the GCC, where our flagship brand, the Myriad, which is based in Dubai, is a student accommodation brand. And then we have got an I8 brand, which is more like a co-living. So we have got operating assets in Dubai, in Muscat, and now we are venturing into Saudi Arabia. And we are working on developing communities of student housing in the region. And now we are progressing again from student housing to co-living, where we have seen that there is a gap in the market because of the dynamics and the demographics of the population. And one of our first flagship project, it will be very soon launched in Dubai.
Excellent. Thank you, Navin. Theo next. Welcome to you.
Thanks, George. Hi everyone. Kerten Hospitality, I'm currently looking with our group at the development. We're a global mixed-use hospitality operator, and I think this is probably the most important and also relevant to this panel topic. We don't define ourselves as a hotel group, although we do have hotels under our operations, but we prefer to call ourselves a mixed-use group. Why is that? It's because we see the opportunity, we see the potential of many other different asset classes, which are not directly linked to the hotel, and this can go within branded residences, service apartments, staff housing, indeed working spaces that can be joined to hospitality developments, as well as food and beverage spaces. So we really like to look at a project from a holistic point of view, where if we can create an ecosystem that integrates different components, whether from a living, whether from a hotel, F&B, retail, and working space, we really try to push ahead for that, because we see a benefit from having a operational mixed-use product rather than just a standard real estate mixed use. We have been hearing mixed use for a long time, but that's really just a real estate point of view, where each component is managed by a different operator. And in that case, we normally see that you really lack the efficiency that you could be able to provide if it was one operator taking care of all the different components and being able to curate everything in an appropriate way. So that's where we come from. We have two main brands which we are developing, especially in the region, in the Middle East. GCC is one of our strongest markets at the moment. We have The House and Cloud7 as our key brands. We're also looking to expand them in Europe. That's where I'm actually based today, because we see the opportunity to actually move this model into Europe, into some key strategic destinations such as Italy, Spain, Portugal, and continue expansion also in Africa.
Thank you, Theo. And finally, Hamza, welcome to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Hamza. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Letswork. Letswork is a marketplace and subscription service for on-demand workspaces, meeting rooms, offices, and more across the Middle East and Europe. So we're currently live in the UAE, Saudi, Bahrain, and soon Jordan. And we're also live in Portugal and Spain and Europe. Letswork is basically an app to help people find places to work from across the globe. People can either sign up for a membership to work from our network of spaces, our partner network of spaces. We don't own any spaces of our own, and we primarily partner with co-working spaces, hotels, work-friendly coffee shops, and even airport lounges, which are all listed on our platform, which our users can work from for the day.
Great stuff. Thank you, Hamza. Okay. It's fair to say some of the asset classes that we'll be talking about today are fairly nascent. I mean, in the case of co-living, not just in the MEA, but full stop. But I'm interested in establishing where these particular asset classes are in their growth and their evolution in the MEA market. So Navin, could I start with you? You mentioned that you're very active in two verticals, student housing and co-living. Can you give us an overview of how mature these two markets are in the MEA region at the moment?
Yeah, definitely. So I'll start with student housing. Student housing as an asset class, it's well established in some markets, particularly in US, UK, because the universities are that old there. It's mostly like some university towns are there across those places. So what has happened in UAE and particularly in the region in GCC, the student housing as an asset class was never existing. So what we have understood that apart from off-campus housing, on-campus housing, which are mostly university dorms. So in the current scenario, apart from the off-campus housing, there is a big focus of the regional governments on-campus housing. They are upgrading the on-campus housing. So there is a huge potential in student housing as an asset class in the region. And our flagship asset, which we opened in COVID in 2020, it's now at a 95% occupancy levels. And we are seeing significant influx of students across the globe who are coming to Dubai as a destination for their higher education. So the migration has helped really a lot in this, and particularly the government initiative of a visa regime and upgrading the infrastructure and public-private partnership has really promoted higher education in the region. And similar thing is happening in Saudi, where the government has allocated a higher budget for education as such compared to the global standards. So the emphasis on education is a lot. And what we believe in Saudi, the universities are really old, and the university accommodation will be upgraded over a period of time. Particularly the state-owned universities, where the population is more like 20,000 per university. So there would be enough demand for student housing in these markets.
Are you
And with
seeing sorry, Hamza, are you seeing a similar scenario in the Gulf states as is occurring in the US and Europe, where demand for student housing is growing much faster than supply?
I think so. Yeah, I definitely agree with Navin. I think as more and more universities are setting up in the country, as you know, the student population. I think I was reading an article the other day as to I think the enrollment of the number of students enrolled in schools has jumped 30% year on year. And I mean that's only going to have knock-on effects for universities later on. Then yeah, I think there's definitely a significant opportunity for student housing operators to expand and build their presence here in the UAE.
Yeah, and if I can add, George, I think here on especially touching on the student accommodation, we have been doing some research, especially some years ago, and we've seen that the market, when we look, for example, at Saudi Arabia, the big majority of the population is young. So you have this big bulk of young students, young early workers that are looking for places where they can actually stay, and therefore we see a huge demand for such type of developments. And I think that then if we move this a little bit forward, there's actually other opportunities as well. We were mentioning before. There are actually a lot of workers that are coming into these countries for satisfying demands for these huge giga projects that are being developed. We can just look at Saudi, and I don't think we can count it with our hands how many giga projects are being developed at the moment. So all these projects need a massive amount of workers. They need a massive amount of talent that comes and needs to actually live in a proper way, also to be able to perform right at their work, right? So we see a big need, a big demand also for staff housing possibly. So switching from student to staff, meaning that we probably change a little bit also on the characteristics and the needs of the target audience. But this could potentially be a huge success for the market. Imagine having these projects where you can actually have a compound where you can satisfy all the people's needs, from living, F&B, working spaces, health, so gym, possibly some pools and some entertainment areas. That could really create a positive outcomes for the workers, but also for the projects at the end.
Thank you, Theo. Navin, what Theo is describing there doesn't sound a million miles away from co-living. Can you tell us a bit about the evolution of co-living in the region and how that's going?
Yeah, so as we have worked on student housing, we have seen a progression to co-living, whereby once the student graduates, he's there in the workforce, and again in the workforce he would be needing housing. And what we are trying to achieve in the region is building communities around main free zones or the working destinations, whether it's media city, it's financial centers, business bay, those kind of areas where we are trying to build communities. And because the rentals have gone up, people want a place where they have got flexibility, they have got convenience, and there is a community element where everything is under one roof, whereby all their major needs, whether their food, whether meeting the like-minded people, events, whether it's proximity to the workplace, because driving also is sometimes can be a bit challenging navigating here. So we have seen a lot of traction there, and we are building something which are closer to the community centers. So this is how the student housing and co-living is shaping up in the region.
Could you tell us a bit about how you differentiate between your student brand and your co-living brand? I mean, in terms of amenities and the physical product, what's the difference between them?
See, student housing is more catered towards the students, whereby the facilities, like, I'll give you an example of the facilities which we have. We have got a big gaming arcade, which students really love. We have got library lounges. We have got funky rooftop pools. We have got indoor theater, amphitheater, world-class gym we have. And particularly what we have is the food options which they want, because these students, they rarely cook. We have got communal kitchens. So it's more like a ecosystem and a community where like-minded people can hang out from different universities. It's not, because being an off-campus is not restricted to only one university. So there is a life around. So we have got a capacity of 2,200 beds. So it's a big community which we are building, and our business model is replicating these kind of communities, whereby there is a lot of interaction in events. And whereby in co-living, there is a more mature audience, and the projects would not be that big. It would be smaller because it would be catering to the community which are working in the close proximity to where the accommodation is there. And another differentiation between a student housing and co-living is there is a lot of floating population in co-living, whereby there are digital nomads. There is people who are working on certain projects who come to the city, and they don't want a place whereby they hire an apartment for a year. They want somewhere where the vibes are there. They can connect to the like-minded people, and they can be very close to the place where they want to work, particularly those consultants who are there on the assignments. And these properties are relatively smaller, and the facilities are a bit different. There's a lot of emphasis on co-working features in these kind of properties. And what we have understood that these people, they preferred more of a place where they can get a healthy food, and there is a lot of emphasis on wellness as well, whereby the gyms are completely structured and to the requirement of young dynamic population.
So the respective audiences for these two products, are they similar in terms of where they're coming from, and you know, it's one demographic that as it gets older it moves from one of your products to the other? Is that what you're aiming for?
No, some of the population do progress, but in co-living, people from across the world are coming to Dubai. So this is the differentiation, whereby anybody can be a target audience for a co-living project, but for a student, he has to enroll into a university. And particularly people who come for co-living might not be the same target audience which are there in student housing, because student housing, particularly the influx of students, is from northern part of Africa and subcontinent and certain regional countries where people come. But in co-living, anybody and across the world, they are coming for co-living.
Okay, thank you. Theo,
so it's more international in terms of co-living.
Yeah, thank you. Theo, did you want to come in on that point?
Yes, I wanted to add on this because I think that Navin was correctly mentioning two of the first phases of this student housing co-living situation, whereas you have students, of course, going into student living, and then early workers that may look at some co-living situations. And if we look at the lifetime of actually an employee, of an average person, we could simply put that a student housing could be appealing from anyone from 18 to 25 years old, approximately. And then from there on, you would have probably 10 years, 5 to 10 years, where there could be actually good clients for a co-living situations. And then there's actually something that has now had a huge boom, especially in markets such as Dubai, which is called branded residences. So this actually shifts to another new model. So in a model where a person, a specific employee, would have already made his sort of capital working for some years and is actually willing to purchase an apartment in a branded residence, where he will receive still services similar to what he was receiving in his co-living or student housing experience, but of course at a totally different level. So normally when we talk branded residences, we're talking about more of a luxury propositions, where you would have a totally different set of services. So maybe you have more emphasis on spa, on some massage treatment areas. You have instead of having a co-working space, you may have private offices or more of a high-end working solution, because maybe not everyone when they've grown into certain position, they're still working in a co-working desk. So you create this kind of elevated experience. And then, funnily enough, I think that if someone would want to end in this kind of loop of serviced accommodation, well, there's a big topic, especially in Europe. I think it will become a big topic also in the Middle Eastern market, which is elderly accommodation. So there is the population is young in the Middle East indeed, but at some point, sooner or later, anyone will grow up, and there will be need for elderly facilities where they can actually live in a community. They can actually continue living and experiencing a different set of services that can actually enhance their quality of life and their overall experience. So, funnily put, someone could pretty much stay in a serviced apartment or co-living situation, let's say from the early start of his career until the end. It must be someone very social.
Yeah, thanks, Theo. In fact, this week, Knight Frank have published a report about how fast the Saudi later living sector is growing and the eligible audience for it. I think we've published the link to that story in the chat there if anybody wants to read it. Hamza, I see you've got your hand raised. So do you want to come in on one of the points there?
Yeah, I think we just wanted to add one more sort of type of residence, which was long stay in hotels, and how that's increasingly becoming popular, especially post-pandemic, well, during the pandemic and now in the aftermath, and how you're increasingly seeing hotels in the UAE just offering, and in Saudi actually as well, offering long stay packages for as cheap as $1,000 a month, and these are your 3-4 star branded hotels, sometimes even 5. I mean, the Rove hotels, I know, our sponsors for this talk here have been draw a significant amount of revenue of that from on a month-to-month basis coming from long stay guests. So I see that becoming increasingly popular as well. With Saudi, what I find interesting is because of the air bridge we have between Dubai and Riyadh, with thousands of people traveling between the two cities on a daily basis. We're seeing a lot of we're seeing a lot of people who are choosing to sort of live in Riyadh, say 3 or 4 days of the week, and then live in Dubai the remaining days. And because of that, you're seeing greater demand for something which is sort of between an apartment and a hotel, and that's exactly the sort of the niche in which long stay hotels and co-living brands sort of fall under. So I think this market is definitely going to continue seeing increasing demand for this sort of category of residents.
Yeah, and actually in tomorrow's webinar we'll be taking a deeper dive into this extended stay segment, because there's even with that there are several sub products. So yeah, if you perhaps one of my colleagues can put the link for that session in the chat shortly for anyone who's interested. Hamza, I want to stay with you for a minute. You're in a great position as you are. You've got a good overview in the growth of the kind of co-working and flex workspace in the region, as you're partnering with so many of them. So can you kind of give us a potted history of the co-working and flex workspace revolution in the Gulf?
Yeah, so I think the revolution was quite delayed compared to our counterparts in sort of Western Europe, North America, and even Asia, to be honest, as well. I mean, just structurally speaking, specifically in the UAE, that the concept of co-working and flex work and everything really didn't take off, and couldn't really take off, simply because of just the infrastructure around the concept of setting up a business and requiring previously requiring a local sponsor, and then them abolishing that requirement, and then companies and still today being limited to issuing only a certain number of residence visas based on sort of the size of the office that they occupy currently in the country. So because of that, I think the concept has been quite delayed, and on top of that, I think the culture as well of being having a traditional sort of office on a long-term lease, and having that office as your own rather than part of like a wider sort of community per se in much larger co-working spaces. I think that's with the UAE and the rest of the Middle East has been quite late to the party, but we're definitely seeing a massive uptake in those spaces. I mean, us as a company as well, we're seeing increasing demand for specifically from not just B2C, and we started Letswork back in 2019 as primarily as a B2C company, and then fast forward to today, we now have B2B and which is enterprise sales, so sales to small and medium businesses to even large corporations, forming about 50% of our revenue. So when you see that, it goes to show how companies are embracing flexible working, they're embracing co-working, they're embracing the ability for their employees to really work from anywhere, they're embracing the ability to the idea of shared desks and not being owning their own private space and having that ownership over that space 7 days a week, but being more flexible with it. And that only is, I think, and that change is really as a result of the acceleration of remote work being adopted by the vast majority of the world, at least the office going world in the last 3 years.
One of the things we're definitely seeing here in Europe is the application of a hospitality ethos and hospitality skills to the office market. So good F&B, programming, events, this kind of stuff. Does that mirror what you're seeing?
Absolutely. So I mean, we have a whole variety of co-working spaces, and traditionally they used to call them business centers here in the UAE, and those are the business centers are typically sort of your mom and shop sort of one-off co-working spaces, but they're quite traditional, where co-working spaces really encompass the spaces which take community and take F&B and take service and everything to another level. And you have spaces like the Bureau and the Co and Unbox, and these are the typical brand names which we have in Dubai right now. And they're all still about 1 or 2 branches each, but all 3 of them have plans to grow in the next 12 to 18 months. But then you still have those business centers who don't take that into account and who solely focus on just giving you the space, really. But the ones that are sort of progressing and the ones that are growing are the ones who are giving that sort of added value to the users, because that's what the users are really looking for. They're looking for that hospitality edge to their work environment too.
And something Theo mentioned earlier is that a lot of hospitality assets, whether it's hotels or student accommodation, an element of co-working space is almost becoming essential to those now.
I mean, that's work. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I just want to say, I mean, that's how Letswork started. I mean, 4 years ago, we didn't think thinking and sitting in Dubai that we're going to aggregate all the co-working spaces and give people access to all of them. Letswork started because we saw that hundreds of people were working from the most popular sort of coffee shops and hotel lobbies, and this is a market that was to be monetized because they were just sitting in the lobbies and occupying the desks and occupying the sofas, and you could really monetize them and connect them all together and create this sort of membership out of it. And that's how Letswork was born. And increasingly, as more and more hotels and cafes open on a daily basis here in Dubai, because the hospitality sector is just so vibrant, plugs in the middle of the lobby, on workstations, on tables, underneath tables, wherever, strong Wi-Fi, meeting room pods and quiet pods. These are all sort of factors that are taken into account for all new hospitality venues that are opening up. Theo?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to continue on this and add that I'm absolutely agreeing with everything, of course, you mentioned. And actually, if we look at today, of course, the tests that were developed in the past years, especially in the past in Dubai. So, of course, they have all these huge lobbies that, as Hamza was correctly mentioning, people occupied by working, but probably that's not the best situation for a coworker. And therefore, all of these co-working spaces started to born. But something that is even more interesting is that nowadays, when we look at new hotels being developed, so the ones that need to be actually open in the coming years or are opening now, usually companies should now rethink the way they have been developing their lobbies. So from this space where actually people can go in and they can work, and it's absolutely not monetized, because no one will come and ask me for to pay a rent or to pay me myself occupying a certain chair in a hotel lobby. Well, now companies are trying to create new spaces where you can actually get something out of it. You can actually create a better experience for the worker. So you put himself in a proper working situation that actually is comfortable enough, so he has all the services he might need, from a printer, from a business a meeting room, or for example a phone booth where he can have a call without being disturbed by the noises of or the music of a hotel lobby. So there's actually a big opportunity and gap in that space. And this, of course, then at the end of the day would benefit the entire hotel, because in the moment you are able to create more passage and more people coming to your lobby and to your place, then you can actually create opportunity for cross-selling food and beverage. So you can create packages from your own restaurant to actually sell to all that workspace community that needs to eat at some stage, of course. And perhaps if you even have a gym, or if you have some wellness facilities, you could also coordinate with that and integrate it into a full package. So there's actually big room for development in that sense. I don't think that going forward the lobbies of the hotels will always be the same. There's huge amount of spaces, which at the end of the day is prime real estate space, because the ground floor is the most expensive rentable space, and if we just use it to occupy let's say non-profitable lobby, it's kind of a waste.
Navin, did you want to come in on that point?
Yeah, so because we are developing a co-living facility, the key emphasis is there on a co-working facility as well. Because there is a co-working facility, that's why the residents are tempted to enroll for a co-living. And this is where the socialization starts, where they feel the sense of community. So I think this is a very important feature, even for a co-living. Because of the flexi work culture, which has been evolving over a period of time in the region.
Thank you, Navin. I want to stay with you for a minute and talk about investment and investor sentiment to these emerging asset classes. You've recently done some quite big deals. One to roll out the Innovate brand with a Saudi fund, as I believe it, and another one for students. So how receptive is the investment community to these new asset classes?
So the investment in terms of student housing is particularly institutional investors. They are very inclined for student housing because of the yield, and it's non-cyclical compared to the other asset class, and the yields are in higher double digit. So that's a critical that's a very critical factor. And in terms of the deployment, also the way our business model work is a ground up development, whereby we develop the project, we complete the construction, it's purpose built, and then we operate it, and then we exit it to another institutional investor at a different capitalized rate. So because of the current inflation trend and the interest rates, investing in a student housing is really an attractive asset class for them.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, and co-living, is that a little bit more nascent? What's the appetite for that amongst investors?
Co-living is a bit nascent because it has not been tested in the region at that scale which we are talking about. Because our student accommodation is more like a 2,200, which is almost 4 or 5 3-star hotel in one go. And co-living would be it's in a very nascent stage at the point in UAE, but over a period of time it will evolve, because in a city there can be 4 or 5 co-living places.
Okay. And one thing we haven't touched on in too much detail, although Theo did mention it earlier, is the senior living, later living market, which in Europe now is starting to mirror student living and co-living, in that there are a lot of rental operators now. It used to be very much driven by private sale, but rentals is really taking off here. Is that a marketplace that you've been tempted to look into, Navin?
At this stage, we are not focused on senior living because we believe that the co-living segment has got really good potential in the region. But I think senior living as an asset class will also evolve because of the influx of people who are coming, and the visa regime which the government has changed. So many of the people, they will take a golden visa and they will feel to settle down in Dubai. And particularly this will happen in like a luxury segment, like a wellness retreat and wellness living.
Yeah. Hamza, you want to come in on that?
I
And
think
actually, Hamza, while you're there, can you maybe explain to us the recent visa changes, just to give the audience a bit of context there? Go ahead, Hamza.
Oh yeah, sorry. No, I think with the visa changes and I guess just senior living in general, I think there's still a long way to go. While the UAE has recently in the last couple of years introduced a golden visa concept, which is valid for say 5 or 10 years depending on the category, it's still there still are requirements, for example, of a certain income. There's still requirements of owning a business, for example, or holding a senior position in a company, so I say a director level. And so those that visa then still comes up for renewal in 5 or 10 years time. And I guess the problem with that is what happens to someone who's crossed retirement then and is at say age 67 or 70, and are they still valid, are they still eligible for a renewal in that golden visa? So I think it remains to be seen what would happen say in 5 or 10 years time, once the initial sort of bunch of golden visa recipients are then are up for renewal. What would be interesting to see is, I mean, I know the UAE, at least the Dubai Tourism Board, sometime last year, along with introducing a remote working visa, they also introduced a senior living visa, and that was basically linked to those elderly individuals retaining a certain amount of money in their accounts, and showing proof of that, or showing recurring income on a monthly basis of a certain threshold as well. So again, like Navin said, I think it's sort of because of those thresholds. I can't remember exactly what the threshold was, but I do want to say it's something along the lines of say $5,000 or $10,000. And so as a result, I think we're leaning more towards the sort of the upper tier segment, and perhaps the luxury segment, instead of the wider sort of retiring population, really. Yeah, I think that's those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Navin, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, another thing which I want to just add on senior living is the insurance industry also has to evolve for senior living, which is a very, very critical element. So till that time, it will take time, and mostly it would be like a luxury, like a second home, which people would be using for. This is my thought on the subject.
Okay, thanks. Navin, I just want to stay with you for a minute and talk about some of the challenges that you're facing in the market at the moment in delivering new inventory. You mentioned inflation, building material costs are going up, labor costs are going up. What are the main challenges that you're facing in getting new assets out of the ground?
The main challenges which we are facing is sourcing the land at a viable price, because of the way the boom has happened in the market. Land should be available at a viable price for the feasibility to work. And secondly, the construction cost has gone up tremendously compared to what we built our projects at. And one critical thing about student housing is that you cannot charge abnormal rents to the students. So these are some of the challenges which we are facing in terms of student housing. And the same logic applies for co-living. But again, the rentals can be a bit flexible because it has to adapt with the market norms.
Yeah. And are these challenges universal across the Gulf states that you're operating in, or are there any specific challenges in some rather than others?
No, the investment challenges are quite unique to the region itself, because the interest rate is a global phenomena, inflation is a global phenomena, and the commodity price is also a global phenomena. So the same logic applies there. And even scouting for land in Saudi is a bit challenging because of the boom.
And what about planning? I mean, in Europe, we hear quite a bit from investors and developers that the planning authorities here don't really understand some of these alternative asset classes, and that can make planning difficult. Is that a situation that you're coming across?
I think in UAE it's a single window clearance where we have liaised with the DTCM, and it was very fast. We built our accommodation in 15 to 18 months during the COVID period. and the government was very receptive of the idea, and there were certain building codes which we need to abide by, and we worked very closely with the authority. So like unlike Europe and other parts where planning permission itself takes a lot of time, and particularly in region like UAE and Saudi, the government really cooperates, and it's a single window clearance, so it fastens the entire process, and we save a lot, and which also enhances our IRR.
Okay, thank you, Navin. Theo.
Yes, I just wanted to add some bits into the European overview. I think that indeed the Middle Eastern and the GCC market has a big potential because it kind of skips the bureaucracy that is still a big issue that we have in Europe. So I would see things in the GCC moving much faster. We have been pitching a lot of projects in Europe, especially Italy, Spain, Portugal, and if in the Middle East, if in Saudi, talking about mixed-use developments, whereas you would combine different components that go from co-working, business hubs, hotel, living facilities, so long-stay facilities, as well as retail, is quite easy in the Middle East, and it becomes quite challenging in Europe. I think that there are two main issues around that. First of all, in Europe, there's very little space in terms of new developments. So normally you need to work with what's there. So you need to take an existing building and you need to convert that existing building. And if a building is developed as a hotel, it would take you an enormous amount of time, bureaucracy, legislation in order to actually convert that building into something different. So many investors are actually scared to enter this kind of conversation because they might end up being stuck for 10 years on a project, just waiting for a piece of document signed by the bureau of whatever municipality commission. So that's something that is a little bit challenging. And secondly, licenses in general are given for specific, let's say, purposes and specific targeted, let's say, direction. So having a mix of different components within the same building is not usually very easy, and in some legislation is not yet approved or accepted by the market. So this generally makes it more difficult in Europe to develop this kind of mixed use or new accommodation hybrid hospitality models. It makes it much easier in the MEA region. However, Europe is still very interesting. You have prices that are skyrocketing. There's a big, especially when we look at the co-living and elderly accommodation in countries such as Italy, Spain, where the actual population is quite old. So it's the total opposite from the Saudi or from Middle Eastern countries, where we see a lot of young and the youth generation being the majority. In Europe, we see a lot of elderly people. They are looking for facilities where they can actually stay, spend their time, and spend their last years. However, what the market has always offered, because this is not something new for the market, we always had elderly accommodation, but it was done from the public and it was very low quality and low service. So it was not something that any elder people would have aimed to be put in. It was really something that was mostly seen as a struggle. So whenever you're not able to take care of yourself anymore, they will put you in a elderly home. So it's really about changing the mindset around this topic, creating a space that is actually entertaining, that is actually fun for them, where they can actually see a lot of benefits in living in, so that it actually becomes interesting, and the elderly are the first ones to actually be willing to move and to make the move.
I was at an event recently where they said that people who are being born today in the developed world are going to live to an average of 140. So that's definitely a growing market. Navin, does the Gulf have an equivalent of, say, the US multifamily segment or the European build-to-rent segment? So institutionally funded large apartment blocks purely for rent. Is that a kind of slice of the market that you're seeing?
Definitely, there is a big potential because of the big real estate funds which are based and which have deployed a lot of capital, and particularly the families in the Gulf, they love something called real estate. So there is a lot of deployment which has happened even in multifamily segment. But what we focus in multifamily is more towards the co-living part. which is also a subsector of multifamily.
Okay, but how established is multifamily in the Gulf? Or is it? I mean, I guess here in the UK we would say it's only really been around for a decade. But is that how does that compare with the Gulf?
I think in the Gulf it's evolving right now, because what happens in Gulf is more like a developer model where they develop and they sell units.
Yeah. Okay.
Whether it's villas or whether it's apartments.
Hamza,
Yeah.
did you on that
Yeah,
point?
I think that isn't to say that it doesn't exist. I think it definitely does exist. There's definitely a gray area, especially from a legal perspective as well, because I think just from like a Dubai municipality and Dubai real estate sort of approval context, I think there still is some gray area regarding that. But I do think there's significant, like a number of the population that do live informally in multifamily units across the country.
Okay, so I want to finish off by going around the three of you in turn with two questions. And the first one is, tell us about some exciting new brands in the living and work spaces that we can keep an eye out for. As you know, you can mention your own, but tell us about some others as well that you find interesting. Hamza, let's start with you, because I think there are a lot popping up in the workspace market.
I think, I mean, especially in the workspace market, we'll start with co-living. I know Hive in Jumeirah Village Circle and is very cool. I personally visited the space, and from my understanding, it's been near 100% occupancy for a very long time. So hugely popular. So excited to see what they do next in both the UAE and the wider regional market. In terms of co-working, I mean, the UAE probably has a handful of brands that are expanding. I know the Bureau, for example, is looking to expand. Unbox, which is another co-working brand, just opened in Expo City recently in time for COP28, which is happening later on this month. And then in Saudi, we've seen a lot of different brands come up, actually more advanced and more mature than the UAE market. There's been some M&A as well with the two largest co-working space operators, the Space and Vibes offices, also merging a few months ago, which was quite interesting to see. But I think there's a lot of brands in the market, and I think there probably will be some form of consolidation as well, because there's just so much potential, and just having, I think the unit economics of just running one co-working space can be improved so much more by having multiple spaces. Yeah.
Hamza, do you think the well-publicized problems at WeWork has affected the growth of the flex space in the Gulf?
Yeah, I think perhaps from an investor perspective, or at least from an investor perspective who isn't really familiar with like the idea of flex offices and how even that sector itself has evolved from WeWork's beginnings, and the business model of how most co-working spaces, at least the new ones that are opening now, is very different from the model that WeWork took on all those years ago, and now as a result of that model, which is lease and sublease, and that creation of real estate arbitrage, I think that really it hasn't come to an end. I still see it, but I think the idea of like management agreements, similar to how the hotel industry operates, I think we're going to see a lot more of those becoming commonplace now in the co-working world as well. But no, I think obviously, I mean, with reports that WeWork may actually file for bankruptcy as early as next week, is very, very scary and very damaging for the co-working world, because it obviously is a bad sort of it's a bad rep for the industry. But I think just considering the market movements and considering how popular they are globally, how they continue to be popular, and how offices for large corporations continue operating at about 30, 40, 50% of occupancy due to the permanency of remote work, I think we're going to continue seeing co-working spaces grow despite that.
Great stuff. Thank you, Hamza. Navin, tell us about some pioneering brands that we should look out for across any of the asset classes we've been speaking about today.
I think that you should look out for our brand called the MEA, which is student housing, and we are the pioneer in the region for student housing. And now we are trying to build this brand with universities because this one is an off-campus housing. So we are trying to establish this with a PPP structure with other established universities within the region, because currently the market has only dorms. And student housing is more like a community. We are trying to build a community with a lifestyle offering which 21st century students need, and the dorms which are there in the market needs to be upgraded a lot. So our business model is really there for the need of the country, whether it's UAE or in Saudi or in certain countries in Africa.
Thank you. Theo, what about your thoughts? What should we be looking out for?
So I think that I've recently come across in some other webinars on some actually interesting concepts. First of all, one I really stuck into my mind was a gentleman that developed a co-working space that really works only within hotel lobbies. So it aims to actually improve functionalities of lobby spaces. It specializes in that field, and it converts those areas into some sort of mixed use of co-working and F&B put together. It's called Denizen. It's actually from Germany. Quite interesting. I'm sure they're expanding first in Europe and then moving on into ahead once they will be ready. I'm of course not sponsoring any of our brands, so as you specifically asked for it, I'm trying to look at different type of concept. And another one that really got my attention, and it's already quite popular, at least in Europe, was once called the Student Hotel, now being named the Social Hub. I think they've had quite a strong development in Europe, and perhaps they have actually a big market also in the Middle Eastern region. So it might be a player that to look after and to be careful, because they've been really strong in their developments, and all their properties have been quite successful, especially because during COVID periods, they were able to really maintain that kind of long stay travelers. So while the hotel part was completely ruined, and of course the COVID had a huge impact on that, the long stayers afforded to actually maintain the business up and running in a very successful way.
Yeah, thank you, Theo. Okay, last question. We have spoken a lot about Dubai today and a lot about Saudi. We haven't touched a great deal on the African market or on other areas of the Gulf. Hamza, where are you eyeing next? Which markets do you see the most potential for you? And as a supplementary question, do you think there are any markets where the current situation with Israel and Gaza might be slowing down or maybe changing your strategy?
Yeah, for the first question, I think Saudi. It's on everyone's mind. It's all you see on LinkedIn. It's basically what everyone's talking about nowadays, especially with the giga projects that Theo mentioned as well. Now hitting ground and going off in construction. So we're super excited for Saudi. Us ourselves, we've just onboarded our first team member in Saudi as well to start doubling down on that. And we've also, when we closed our seed round at the end of last year, we brought on a bunch of Saudi investors too, who've been, on our case to start, expanding there for good reason as well, because, we anticipate so much demand. And in the last couple of months that we have been live in Saudi, all of our sort of users haven't actually been Saudi users in Saudi. They've actually been users from the UAE that travel to Saudi or have teams in Saudi. So we've just been inundated with that. So we're super excited with the kingdom for obvious reasons. And then with the conflict or whatever you'd like to call it that's happening in Israel and Palestine, I think that the wider implications are too early to tell. I was anecdotally hearing from co-working spaces in Jordan who we're speaking to right now, who've mentioned that things have become awfully quiet in their space, so they're seeing less and less people coming in and leaving their homes and to work from those spaces. So you never know really, especially with a conflict as complicated as that. It's hard to tell how it would sort of progress, and if it were to come to an end, then what even happens after that. So it's in God's hands, really.
Yeah, thank you, Hamza. Navin, how about you? Which markets are you looking at other than the ones we've already mentioned?
We are looking at a market in Egypt where there is a lot of student population, and we are doing a feasibility studies on that. And there is a lot of influx of capital from Gulf, which goes into Egypt. So Egypt is a very interesting market, and because of the close linkages which Gulf has with Egypt.
Thank you. And Theo?
Well, I think that there's actually in the GCC there are still some countries that have huge potential. Probably Bahrain being one of those. We think both from a touristic and also development point of view, it has always been quite interesting for us. Oman is another country that could potentially have a huge success and is still fairly underdeveloped from an hospitality point of view. So there's actually a lot of chains that are looking into that. And we definitely are really interested because the country probably is one of the it's very nice. There's some really nice landscaping and areas that could actually attract tourists and are attracting tourists nowadays. But of course it's not experiencing the kind of development that Saudi is. So there is a gap to actually cover all of that. And in terms of Africa, Egypt has indeed been an extreme interest from our end. We have seen that there is the population in Egypt is constantly growing. There's a constantly new need for co-living, branded residences, hotel developments, and the country is still looking for new areas to develop. So you have a full North Coast, which is currently under probably one of the biggest interest from different investors, different hotel chains. But you have also other areas that could possibly be investigated. And then, well, Africa is one of our focuses at Kerten. So we are looking forward to actually enter the market. It's you need a local hand in Africa, because when we can't forget that Africa is a number of countries, which is actually not small, and each country has its own jurisdiction and it's completely different to deal with. So you need a local hand that can really support in each of these legislations. And therefore, I think we need to take a focused approach, kind of target which countries fit best our purposes and where we can start. Of course, there are countries where it's very challenging to enter, because maybe if you put in your money, then you're not able to take it out because of some legislations issues. So we of course need to be very careful with that.
Yeah. I may have missed it, but I don't think anyone's mentioned Qatar, which has spent a huge amount of money on infrastructure, coinciding with hosting the World Cup. Has anybody got any plans to make some moves there?
Tough one, I guess.
Like a resounding no. Okay.
No, it's a tough question. I think that we have looked at some opportunities there, but if we look first from a hotel point of view, would it make sense to just build one additional hotel in Qatar, where now probably the occupancy is quite low, and we have a huge supply and little demand? Probably not. Probably will there be a strategy from the country to actually improve tourism and improve the number of people going in? There could be, but at the moment I don't think that there is need, because no need to put more concrete into the country where you still have a lot of places that are not full.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Theo, and thanks to all of you for your contributions today. It was a really interesting topic. We managed to pack a lot in an hour. Just want to show a couple of slides before we finish, and as I mentioned, we'll leave the session open for a couple of minutes so you can take some notes from the chat. So tomorrow is the last in this series of 4 MEA focused webinars, and as I mentioned earlier, we will be taking a deeper dive into the extended stay and service department segment. If you'd like to participate in that one, you can see the link to register in the chat. And the next in our regular urban living series is on November the 22nd. It's called Building for a Net Zero Future. So we'll be looking at the net zero issue from the point of view of customers, from investors, from developers, and more. It's a hot topic for everyone. So I hope to see plenty of you on that one. The link again to register for that is in the chat. If you're interested in working with us at IHM, whether on our digital offerings or our in-person events, please get in touch with my colleague Henry, whose details you can see on the screen and also in the chat. And finally, thanks for joining us today. Thank you to Hamza, to Navin and to Theo for their great contributions. Thanks to you for watching. Thanks to Rove Hotels for sponsoring the series, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks very much, everyone.